Hello and welcome to Westside Wise Wednesdays, presented to you by Quest Communities and connected to you by AT&T, where we are giving you the news that you can use with the information that you cannot refuse. Let's get into it. And today we have a very informational conversation for you, okay? So we have in the house Dr. Eri Saikawa. Dr. Eri, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Very good. Thank you so much for being here. And I know that you want me to call you Eri, right?
That's right.
And like I told you in the elevator, I have never been close enough to a doctor to not call them doctor. So, hey, Eri girl, how you doing?
I'm so glad to be the first person that you can call me.
Yes, I am as well. And so Dr. Eri is here from Emory University. Is that okay?
Dr. Eri again.
I said it again. I'm sorry, y'all. I got to get used to this. Eri. Eri is here from Emory University, and for those of you who are probably wondering, why are we having Emory University on a podcast for Westside Wise for Atlanta Westside residents? Well, there is a thing that some of you may or may not be aware of, an EPA designated superfund site for an excessive amount of lead in our soil here on the west side of Atlanta, specifically Vine City and English Avenue neighborhoods. And we'll get into this a little bit later in detail, but EPA is testing the soil and doing the remediation for the actual plots of land here. But Emory University, and again, I think I'm saying this right, we will get into the details, is actually testing the children on the west side, correct? Okay. So that's our intro. Let's again get on into it. So Eri, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah.
And you can go all the way back to Japan if you like, because that's interesting.
Right. So I was born in Japan. I am Japanese. And then I did engineering in Japan and then came here because I wanted to understand how engineering can be useful for policy making. And so I studied policy at Indiana University, Bloomington, and then realized that policy itself cannot really do much. So I went into an interdisciplinary PhD program at Princeton. And then I went on to MIT to do atmospheric modeling, and then I came here at Emory.
So you're just a genius, huh?
No.
I'm just sitting here in the presence of a genius. Oh, my gosh. And how did you start with Emory University?
Yeah, so I came to Emory because I really wanted to do an interdisciplinary research, and then it was exciting for me because I could work on environmental science, but also on health, and then the policy part.
Absolutely. Okay, and tell us, so the West Side Atlanta neighborhoods and this lead issue, this huge lead issue, how was that discovered and who discovered it?
Yeah, so this was a very spontaneous project that we came up with. So what we've been working on until that time was to understand greenhouse gas emissions coming from farms. Okay. And so we were doing an experiment at the University of Georgia experimental site, and my then PhD student, Sam Peters, was really doing that project. But he was a PhD student in environmental health sciences, and so we wanted to connect his work on greenhouse gas emissions to a little bit more on health. Okay. And at that time, the city of Atlanta was trying to have an urban agriculture going in Atlanta, and they were planning to lease the land to have more urban farming going. And so we asked the city if we could kind of test the soil to make sure that the soil is safe. And Sam took on that project and found that one of the lots that was, potentially going to be used for urban farming in the west side had a lot of lead.
Oh, my gosh.
And so that was when we were able to work with Hercules Center at Emory to be partnered with Historic Westside Gardens. And so then Sam and Historic Westside Gardens partners were able to go into different home gardens and community gardens to make sure that the soils were safe. Mm-hmm. And out of the 11 residential lots, we found 3 of them that had high lead levels.
Oh, my gosh.
And so that made us very concerned. And we had a tomato festival with the Historic Westside Gardens.
Oh, my gosh.
So that a lot more residents were able to bring the soil samples themselves, and we screened the soil. Mm-hmm. And that was when Rosario Hernandez,
absolutely.
Yeah, from Historic Westside Gardens, brought her piece of rock from her own garden.
Like the actual... She didn't even know that it was
exactly. Lead. Yeah, so that was the slag piece that she brought. And then, that's the industrial waste from smelting. And then we actually tested the slag piece on the spot. and it had about 2,000 ppm of lead. 400 is the standard.
And just that piece
in
had.
that piece.
Oh my gosh, that is unbelievable. So if it was not, so how did this part of the city, because there's lots of urban areas in the entire state, right? And then, okay, so you chose Atlanta. Okay, cool. So how in the world did you guys happen to just choose that location? Like, what a blessing, right? Because nobody would have even discovered that lead that was there. So that is crazy.
Yeah, I think it was definitely not a blessing that this was dumped.
No.
Right.
That's for sure.
Yeah, but at that time, I guess it wasn't considered to be so hazardous. And then, but I do believe that it might have been the case that it was a historically black neighborhood.
Absolutely.
And so it was probably easier to dump them. And unfortunately, it was used as a fill material.
Yes.
It seems like. And so the EPA's, digging the soil to clean up, and then they're finding a lot of them even, down the soil ground.
Absolutely. Like deeper.
Yeah, much deeper.
Much deeper.
Yeah, I was told like even after 8 feet.
It's still there.
It's still there.
Oh my gosh. And then all the, turning of the soil and digging up and all of the construction that's going on, does that make it worse? Does it kind of bring it up to the surface or put it in the air or anything like that? Is that a consideration as well?
Yeah, so I think a lot of development that's happening, right? I think you have to use it in a way that's going to actually clean up the soil.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the demolition of the home is not done properly.
Yep.
And so the paint, the leaded paint that was used in the past could be demolished in a way that's just put on the soil. And so that could also cause a lot of lead problems.
Oh my
You just
gosh.
need to make sure that that's not on the ground.
Well, we appreciate your work. You've been here from the get-go. Your boots on the ground. I know you're always on the west side. I know me and you are always in contact, and we definitely appreciate your work, and you definitely seem to go above and beyond. And speaking of those relationships, is there a relationship? Obviously there is, but explain, if you can, the relationship between the EPA and Emory, and how the two organizations are working together right now on this project.
Yeah, so when Sam Peters was starting to do this project, he was actually taking a class by Tim Frederick at the EPA. He was teaching at Emory. And so Tim has been really instrumental in our work. He was actually the one that was with me at the Tomato Festival when we shot the slag pieces to find. And he was the one that said, "This is slag." I didn't know what slag was. No. And he said, "This is slag, that's the waste
Even before
material."
they tested it,
exactly.
He recognized it.
He recognized it, and he said, "This is very similar to what's in Alabama," he said. And so I actually brought the piece back to Emory to ask the geology professor, Bill Size, if this was indeed slag, and he said, "Yes, this is slag."
Oh my gosh.
And so we were, actually able to test in the lab. We crushed them into pieces and sieved them and then tested them, and also the soil pieces, and we were able to give the report back to the EPA because we also found there was a mound of slag in an empty lot, and the kids were playing around, and so we said that this seems to be happening in the West Side. And then Tim actually brought it to the EPD, Environmental Protection Division, and then EPD brought it back to the EPA, and then EPA started the investigation. And that was at first the 60 lots around English Avenue.
And then they expanded it.
Expanded to 360 lots, and then expanded it.
Because how do you know exactly where it would stop? I don't know if they've identified that at this point, but they certainly had to expand it at a certain point.
Right.
That is awesome background information. Thank you so much. Okay, so Eri, so the EPA, and I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, the EPA does remediate and test the soil and the land, but Emory is testing our children, which obviously is a very, very important initiative. Can you tell us some of the symptoms that would be associated with high lead levels in children?
Yeah, so the lead is very important for, if we're exposed to lead, then that can have neurodevelopmental impact on children.
Yes.
And so I think a lot of us know how it impacts the IQ. So we really don't want the kids to be impacted, and then that's also, irreversible. And the younger that they are impacted, then that can have a longer time impact. And so what we are really interested in is to understand the potential exposure source. And so that includes the soil, the paint, the dust, etc. And so that's why we try to also test, and then also the kids' urine and the blood, so that we can understand what they might be exposed to.
Absolutely.
And what we can do about it.
And what is the optimal age for testing?
So we definitely want kids to be testing before 1 year old, if possible.
Before 1, okay.
And then
that doesn't give much time.
Right. If you don't, then, testing before 2 years old to make sure that you're not exposed, because the only way to find out if you're exposed or not is by taking the blood levels.
That is absolutely it. No other way that you can test.
It's very difficult.
Okay. So I know you said urine test, but the urine test wouldn't test for lead levels. That would test for something else.
Urine, we do also try to see if we can find lead, but that's not the gold standard.
Gotcha.
And so urine, we're using it for other elements.
Yep. The gold standard is literally blood.
Right,
and
for lead.
And you guys do for lead. And you guys do have another type of test, correct?
That's correct, because we were told by a lot of residents that they didn't want the needles in their kids. And so then we found this equipment that you can put on the arm.
Wow.
And so some children still cry.
Of course.
But some children don't. And so, some don't feel it at all. Some feel it a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're trying to find.
What do you call that so that a parent could do some research on that?
So it's called Tasso Plus.
Tasso. How do you spell that?
TASSO.
Tasso Plus. Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
plus
That's like an
sign.
alternative to the actual needle.
That's right.
Okay, cool. So my son, he was 6 years old. He has been tested, but we just went to CHOA.
Yeah.
And so I was able to talk to him about, a needle. It goes in really quickly. The only sting you really feel is just the alcohol, like if you hurt yourself. And he sat there and he did it, But so I did choose just to do the needle. But definitely, again, parents listening, Tasso Plus, do your research on that. That is an alternative to the needle for the blood testing for lead, TASSO. Tasso Plus. And the optimal age by 1, definitely not beyond 2. But if you feel like your child has been exposed to lead or is exhibiting some symptoms, please just go ahead and get them tested, right?
Yes,
Even if
that's
it's
right.
beyond 1 or 2.
Yes, exactly.
And you said that you're able to test other sources of leads in our children's homes on the west side?
Right. So we would test the dust, soil, and the paint.
Paint as well. Water?
No water.
No water? That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Any plans to start testing that or?
So that's something that we've been, thinking about. We do get asked a lot. And my research mainly is on air. And so it is pretty much of a stretch to be doing soil. I'm learning a lot.
It's good.
It
That's
would
very
be great to be able to work with somebody that works on water to be able to look all into
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
Well,
so far, not yet.
That's okay. Maybe we'll get some funding, okay? Anybody who's listening, we can start doing water as well. I mean, you never
That's
know.
right.
We got a lot of water issues in this country, it
That's
seems
very
like. So,
correct, yes.
And it's kind of switching gears just a little bit. What type of funding is Emory receiving for this huge initiative? Are you receiving any funding? Hope so.
Yeah, so we were able to receive the EPA funding to do this work, looking at 140 children in the West Side, collecting the dust, soil, and paint samples, as well as the children's blood and urine. So we are especially targeting 6 months to 6 years old.
Okay.
But we realized after starting this work that there are a lot of parents that want all their kids to be tested.
Beyond 6.
Beyond 6.
Okay.
And I think that is a very important area. And so that's something that we are wondering if we can do as well or expand. So that's, yeah.
Absolutely. Are you facing any challenges receiving enough funding?
So I think this administration, it has got better.
Okay.
But in the past, it has been very difficult. And I do think that people are starting to realize the importance of community-based participatory research.
Yep.
But I think the funding is still very much lacking.
Got you.
And so how can we actually, expand that research that does work with the community and that can go back to the community, give back to the community, and then work in the way that is useful to the community? I think that's something that we really have to work on more.
Absolutely. Is there any way for the community at large, or maybe specifically myself, because I'm definitely interested in helping with this initiative, we can assist in securing necessary funding? Anything we can do?
Yeah, so I think it would be really great. There is a specific grant now for NIH, National Institutes of Health. So I think being able to apply for a grant like that is going to be very nice. And then there are other foundations, I think, that is looking into this kind of work. So expanding the partnership like this, I really appreciate. And then being able to work together on meaningful projects.
Absolutely. Can you name anyone who, besides EPA, have you gotten any, would that be philanthropic or foundational type of support?
I have
government?
not. No,
That's
not
okay.
one. But
Again, whoever's listening and watching, okay?
But the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta,
Okay.
they did fund at the very beginning stage to do the soil testing. So that was really helpful.
Absolutely.
And that was actually one of the reasons why we were able to collect a lot of soil samples from the Community Science Soil Shop.
Okay.
And then that led to 300 soil samples actually testing in Georgia. That was one of the largest number of samples that we were able to test.
Absolutely. So. That's awesome. So, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Ebony Ford, host of Westside Wise. Access to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet is more important than ever. That's why AT&T is furthering its efforts to help bridge the digital divide by offering new solutions that help households here in Atlanta and beyond stay connected to work, education, healthcare, and more. AT&T has worked to reduce barriers to the cost of home internet service by combining access from AT&T, which provides low-cost internet service for eligible households, with the Federal Affordable Connectivity Program benefit. Eligible households can get free home internet service. I discovered access from AT&T at a time when I had no car, no job, no money, no internet. It was the segue for me to be able to apply for benefits, look for childcare programs, look for jobs, and attend training. It literally was my foundation to be able to get back on my feet. And it all started with access from AT&T. Terms and restrictions apply. Speeds up to 100 megabits per second where available. Learn more at att.com/internet/access.